Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. It is always a pleasure to be with you. Happy to be here on this Halloween. Happy Halloween. It is not that much of a thing here. There's a few little things you can tell that they're giving a nod to some of the expats that live in Portugal, but it's not really popular. There's no trick-or-treating per se. Last year we just happened to be out and about when the local school children did a little parade in their costumes and they were adorable. We missed it this year. I don't even know what time it starts. We just accidentally saw it last year. But yeah, there will be no trick-or-treaters at our house. All of my decorations are still in storage, and that makes me very, very sad because I just want my Halloween socks and my Halloween earrings. I like Halloween. It's not like my favorite holiday ever, but I enjoy it. I like the fun, silly version of Halloween as opposed to the eek, scary, gory Halloween. If you've listened to the podcast, this is not surprising to you, right? You're probably thinking, well, yeah, of course you do. It's the exact same that you talk about with horror. You don't like gore. It's true. But I do enjoy Halloween. I love seeing the little kids in their costumes trick-or-treating. So I am missing it today. But if you are going out tonight, please be safe and have fun. Have extra fun for me. I'll be thinking about all of you as you trick-or-treat. So enjoy that. I hope that you are, first off, having a great week. Second, having a great Halloween. Maybe you had a good weekend. Ours was pretty quiet. We worked and we saw some friends we haven't seen in a while. I've seen one of them more recently than the hubby. The hubby hasn't seen any of them since I think April, which is crazy. But we got together with them just for a really low-key afternoon, and that was great. So, rained a lot this weekend, which I always appreciate. Things are greening up nicely after the very dry summer. But we are not here to talk about Halloween or the weather or all those fun things. We are here to talk about books and talk to an author, as usual. And this week we have returning guest Mary Keliikoa, who is here to talk about the second book in her Misty Pines mystery series. She has been on the podcast now. This is her third time. If you would like to listen to either of her other episodes, the first time she was on, it seems to be becoming a tradition with us that she comes on about this time of year, because her first appearance was on episode 319. That was on October 26th, 2021. And then her second appearance was episode 380 on November 25th, 2022. So definitely this time of year she tends to come. Her next appearance actually is going to be in June. So, interview in June. I think the episode will be in July of next year. So she's coming to me early next year, which is cool. But I always enjoy when Mary is on. At any rate, as I said, this is the second book in the Misty Pines series. It is called Deadly Tides. The first book was called Hidden Pieces. Let me go ahead and give you the description of Deadly Tides. Sheriff Jax Turner is learning to live again. Holding tight to the hope of reconciling with his FBI agent ex-wife, the wary man is determined to keep his focus on his coastal Oregon community. And after a concerned brother requests a welfare check, Jax is troubled to find the absent surf shop owner's tracks lead to a pool of blood. Now investigating a potential homicide, Turner chases a tip from his former spouse about a severed foot found on the beach. But when a torrent of leads link links the victim to a politician's son, a jealous competitor, and a get-straight youth program for youth. The steadfast lawman fears layers of lies and secret agendas will keep him from stopping a vicious killer. Can he unravel the fatal agenda before he's the next corpse to wash ashore? That is the description of Deadly Tides. Again, it's the second book in this Misty Pines mystery series. If you're a fan of mysteries, crime fiction, again, my favorite kind, some good suspense, not a lot of gore. Although we do have severed feet in this book, but it's not like there's a lot of detail given. Those are the kinds of things I appreciate. I can be like, ooh, that's creepy, that's a little gross, but I don't need every detail of every severed artery in that foot or vein or bone, whatever. I don't need all the detail, and we do not get that in Mary's books, so I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and let Mary talk about not only this book, but her other book in this series, Hidden Pieces, as well as some of the other books that she's written and is working on. Again, the book is Deadly Tides. The author is Mary Keliikoa. Let's go to the interview.
Hi, Mary. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you again. I'm excited to talk about the newest book in the Misty Pines series. But of course, before we do that, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about yourself. So if anyone needs a refresher or they're meeting you for the first time, they can get to know you a bit.
Okay. Well, I'm a Pacific Northwest native. I also live in Hawaii, but my roots are from the Oregon and Washington area. And I write murder suspense. I've actually written a couple of series, the P.I. Kelly Pruitt mystery series, and now this latest is the Misty Pines mystery series. Before I started writing, though, my first love was in the legal field. I spent 18 years as a paralegal secretary, and that's, I think, where my devious mind came from. All those years in the legal field. And yeah, so I'm a mystery suspense author.
But that makes perfect sense. You have that experience and you can then, segue into writing crime fiction and it works out, right?
Yes, that's what I always say. I've always loved those puzzles and that, law and order justice thing. So it all kind of combines.
Absolutely. Well, this is the second book in the Misty Pines series. The last time you were on, we talked about Hidden Pieces, which is the first one. This one is Deadly Tides. Can you first off give an overview of the series?
Yeah. So the entire series is set down at the Oregon coast. And Misty Pines is a fictional town, but it actually is an area of the Oregon coast where I grew up. So I really thought that the coastal range in particular, especially for this series, really lended itself as a secondary character. It has a very creepy vibe, the moss hanging off the trees and the mist hanging around the ocean, the fog. So I was really excited to set a series down at the Oregon coast. And then, of course, I needed a sheriff to work the cases, and that was Sheriff Jax Turner. So the series really focuses in on him and his need and desire for redemption as a cop and as a man in particular. And, and it's a small community. So I really like to focus in, think Longmire a little bit, but down at the Oregon coast is kind of how I like to describe the book.
Yes, and anyone who has lived in a smaller community is going to recognize that they're just going to recognize certain aspects about life in a small town, right? And
everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And if they don't know you, they at least know who your family is, right?
That's right. Yes, so they know something about you, whether you want them to or not. Things just seem to get in the rumor mill quickly there.
Yes, which is, it's an interesting scenario for Jax because when we meet him in the first book in Hidden Pieces, he is not in a good place. And he hasn't been in a good place for a long time since his daughter died. And it's interesting because he's the sheriff of this small community and he's almost barely functioning. So in some ways he has that safety net of a small community, but in other ways, everyone knows what is going on.
Very true. Yeah. And I really liked that. I liked it. He needed to be in a place where he could almost be not functioning to some degree, right? Because he's always viewed Misty Pines as a safe place. Not a lot of crime happens there. So, it's been okay. But all of a sudden things are kind of forcing his hand to look at himself and to redeem. And then, of course, now he's got some opportunities for redemption, which is what I really love, that character study and growth.
Right. Otherwise, there would be no arc, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, now you have an overview of the series as a whole. You're going to get the overview specifically for Deadly Tides, but we are going to take the first break of this episode. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Mary Keliikoa. We are talking about Deadly Tides, which is the second book in her Misty Pines mystery series. Let's return to that interview.
So this one is Deadly Tides. Can you give an overview of this story?
Yeah. So we meet Jax a few months later after, Hidden Pieces. Life has kind of righted itself a little bit. He's pulling himself together a little bit more. We don't see him at quite the same dark space that he was, which I think is good and normal, right? So, but he's still faced with his small crew of people, his deputies, and he's been asked to do a welfare check on a local surf shop owner. The guy's brother had been chatting with him the night before, and suddenly the surf shop owner heard a noise in his garage, and he runs out to check, and then he never calls his brother back. Well, unfortunately, Jax is going to show up, and things are going to look amiss at the property, and that begins the search for the surf shop, which Jax will find out later is a legend, has a great history of being a surfer, and has got some great surf designs that people may be seeking. And of course, now it's a potential homicide. So, the other aspect of the book, though, that's really cool is that I bring in Mary Keliikoa, and Abby is Jax's ex-wife. And, her mother has Alzheimer's, and she's been missing from her care home. And unfortunately, when Abby finds her, she finds that her mother has found a severed foot. And so Abby's going to be working a case. Jax is going to be working a case. And let's just say they are probably going to cross at some point.
Right. There's a lot of stuff going on at the beginning where you're like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
I'm assuming because of the book, things are going to tie in together, but I don't know how yet.
Lots of little springs.
Yes. And we met Abby in the first book, but she has entire chapters from her point of view. So I'm assuming that was a conscious choice to bring in her perspective. Can you talk a little bit about now bringing more of her character and her viewpoint into the book?
Yeah, I really wanted, because Abby is a smart, FBI agent, and we did meet her in the first book, and maybe, it's funny, I've had some comments about that they don't always like Abby as much, but I really understand Abby, and I thought that she really needed to have a second stage in this particular novel. She is a woman who just processes grief a little differently, but she keeps Jax on his toes in a lot of ways, and I think that that's a good thing. And it was a conscious decision to bring her in and give her her own case. I think the biggest thing with Jax and Abby is they've lost trust in each other. And what better way to start rebuilding than to start on a business level, which is something Jax and Abby are really good at. They're good at their jobs, even though they falter and they've had their issues, they're good at their jobs. And so they're going to learn to trust each other's opinions and gut instincts on some of this as time goes on.
What I liked with bringing Abby in is that you mentioned some people don't always care for her character, but in the first book and in a lot of this book, we're seeing Abby through Jax, and he really wants something from their relationship that she's not sure she's ready to give, if they can repair their relationship. And then we start to see Abby's point of view, and so we get because there's two sides to every story, right, and two sides to every relationship. But for me, I really appreciated that we did get to see that more human side of Abby.
Right. And that was really part of it as well. It's just giving her time on the page so that people did see that, because she does have reasons. She doesn't just arbitrarily decide that, she's going to give Jax a hard time. He's lost her trust on a lot of levels, and he needs to earn it back. And she's just, she's got a lot going on with her mom being ill. And of course, she lost Lulu too. So she's processing her grief in her way as well. So I thought it was really important. I'm glad you pointed that out, because that really is part of it as well, is that you get to see her part of it, why she made her decisions.
Mm-hmm. And there's obviously Abby's mother has a little bit of a role in this book. So of course, in every book you meet new characters, but one new character that I am interested in getting to know a little better, I'm hoping that she makes more appearances, and I assume she will, is Rachel. Can you talk a little bit more about her?
Yeah, so you will meet her, because the next book she will have her own POV.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I really wanted to give, since I don't want to give away the plots of the first book, of course, but let's just say there's some changes in this station. And so Jax is going to need somebody he can rely on, and he needs to hire someone. And I thought, what better way to put somebody in there that he might know. So Rachel is the daughter of Jax's ex-partner. I hope I explained that right. Yes. So Jameson, his partner, who we meet in book 1, this is his daughter. And so, Jax has some history with Rachel, but it's the history of like an uncle, because he's watched Rachel grow up. And so now he's got her walking through the door, applying for the job. And I thought that was a really cool way to just bring in Jax's past, somebody that knew Jax from an earlier time, but also really gives Jax a role of authority, but also like that compassion and, being an uncle in some ways, right? So, and then of course there's Koa the dog. Koa's, and any time I can put a dog in a book is a good thing for me. I love that.
Actually, I hadn't thought about that. I was thinking about Koa, but I'd forgotten that there is a dog in the other series as well. You're right.
Yes.
Very different dogs, though.
Very.
I follow a guy on TikTok, and he has merchandise that you can buy a sweatshirt that says "Tell your dog I said hi," and so I'm just laughing because I'm totally that person.
Yeah, me too.
What about the dog? We've got new characters. We've got evolving characters, obviously. How about for this book, research? Was there anything in particular that you needed to research for this story?
Well, because I really kind of hopped on this phenomenon of severed feet, which is an actual phenomenon that happens here in the Pacific Northwest. I did a little bit of research on that, obviously, and it happens a lot more to the north of us, which is around the Salish Sea, and there's a particular area of the ocean that the tides and the wave structure allows for body parts to be, brought in from the ocean, which sounds terrible, but I found it very intriguing. And so, I did a little bit of research on that phenomenon to make sure that it would work for deadly tides. But that was probably the most research I had to do. As far as like the surfing aspect of the book, my husband is Hawaiian. He was a surfer on the Hawaiian Islands. So it was also fun to be able to tap his knowledge about surfing and different things. I mean, that end scene of the book is really part of the Hawaiian culture. And so I did a little research on that too. But, obviously I lived with the person I needed to talk to. So that worked out well.
Yeah, that's convenient at any rate.
Yes, it is.
It's time to take our second break for this episode, but we are going to talk more about those severed feet. So stay tuned for that. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with Mary Keliikoa. Let's go ahead and return to that conversation.
The severed feet, I was fascinated by, a little grossed out by, but fascinated by. I had not heard of that phenomenon, so that had to have been kind of an odd thing to find yourself researching.
It is, and yet the minute I'd heard about it was a while back, I knew I wanted to write a story that I could have that implemented in. In fact, what's funny is I work with a detective who worked cold case and he retired from that. He's actually a deputy sheriff now. But the minute I told him I was interested in doing a severed foot aspect of my book, he sent me articles. So, he was the one that was like sending me stuff like, here, check this out, check that out, and it is gross. It's creepy. And yet it's intriguing because it is not something that happens everywhere in the world. It's, very, very common in this particular area, which is, interesting.
Right. And I'm just, every time I talk to authors, I love to find out what they research and just the crazy things that they must put into Google search.
Yeah. Well, there is that cup or that t-shirt that says, if I die, erase my, internet search engine or whatever. There's reasons for that.
Exactly. It's always tricky with books like this that, they're crime fiction, they're mystery. You don't want to give too much away. And of course, now we've got a series. And so it's a little tricky to talk about a lot of things. There's many questions I want to ask you about the end of the book that I will not because I think spoilers. But how about in terms of the overall arc of the series, do you have, when it comes to characters, do you kind of just let them keep coming into the story as they will, or do you have, and here I'm talking more like some of the secondary characters. Obviously, a little bit where Jax and maybe Abby are going in the series, but what about secondary characters? Do they come and go as they please, or do you have a pretty tight rein on that?
They kind of come and go as they please. I'm a pantser, so I don't plan too far ahead of anything. I do know where Abby and Jax are headed in the third book. I have the ending already in my head, and I have the crime that they're gonna be working on. But as far as like what the other characters will be doing, I know what Rachel's gonna be doing too, but they do come and go. A lot of it is what serves the story. I try to keep it as organic as possible, and not manipulate too much but I'm still the chess master, right? I still do need to put people places they need to be in that. But, Rachel was kind of a surprise. I wasn't necessarily expecting Rachel to show up in the second book, but she did. And it was organic and it seemed like the right place to go. And so you never know who will show up in the third book, but at least we know Jax and Abby are solid there.
Sure. And I can imagine that a character like Trudy has to be a lot of fun to write because you can kind of just.
Yeah. She's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, she says what we're all thinking a lot of times.
Right. She really does. And she's that maternal person, in Jax's life that just doesn't let him get away with too much. And I think everybody, we all need that person that just doesn't buy our BS that tells us how it is. So
yes. not always comfortable, but they're necessary, right?
It can be, yes.
Yeah. What are you currently working on?
Well, I am drafting out the third book of the series, but I also have another book coming out next year. So I've been working on just, copy edits for that. That book is Don't Ask, Don't Follow. That'll be out in June. It's a domestic suspense. So a little bit different than what I've been working on. I've been doing investigative type books, with an actual, cop or a PI, but this will be a sister who is searching for her other sister. And so that's going to be a whole lot, different, as well. So, I've got that. And then I'm just working on drafts at the moment, working on more books. So.
Sounds great. Is Don't Ask, Don't Follow a standalone, or is it part of another series?
Yeah. So it's going to be a standalone. It is my first standalone. So yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, actually I was just going to ask you, do you prefer writing standalones? Do you prefer writing series? Do you not really care either way?
I don't know that they each have their challenges, right? Because one, you have to make sure that you're tying up all the loose ends, which sometimes can be a challenge. And I do like the series writing because you get to hang out with the characters for a while. So I guess I would say I lean towards series because then I can go deeper into the character over a longer period of time and reveal the layers like an onion, right? Peel them back and you get to find out something new about that person. But I had fun with this domestic suspense, and actually the other draft I'm working on is another domestic suspense. So, maybe I think I have room for both in my world. So I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, I was actually thinking something similar when I was thinking about this interview and the book, and really how much more character development you can do in a series as opposed to a standalone, because you've got time. So Jax and Abby have a lot more time to kind of figure out the relationship in a way that's more the way the rest of us do it, now I don't want to say human, but in a real world versus fictional world, we don't figure everything out in the space of 300 pages.
So true.
It feels a little more, it can be more frustrating because you want them to figure it out, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, but when do the rest of us actually say the right thing or figure things out quickly?
Right. And it is a balance, right? Because you don't want to, it is a murder mystery, obviously, and you don't want to overdo the relationship aspects of the book, but definitely it is part of who they are and how they work and, what drives them. So I think it all intermixes, but yes, having that extra time to really uncover it, I think is a good thing.
And I think for readers, it is a murder mystery, and we want to find out how it all happened and who did what and everything, but having those relationships and getting to know those characters brings in the more human aspect. I've read some mysteries where the main character can be so troubled that they're almost robotic, and they're not as compelling as people who really are kind of living in their own mess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. And I like character driven novels. There's definitely room for everything on the market, right? But I know that I gravitate to finding out not only who killed the person or, the puzzle and solving the puzzle, but really getting to know who's actually investigating. I just find that much more interesting when you can combine all of that together.
I would definitely say that I agree with that. I like character driven novels a lot. So this series works well in that regard. Time for our final break of this episode. When we come back, I will be grilling Mary on what she's been reading lately. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with Mary Keliikoa.
Well, how about switching from writing to reading? What have you been reading lately?
Gosh, I've been reading, I'm doing some judging stuff, so I can't talk about everything I've been reading, but this morning I spent an hour reading The Drowning Woman by Robin Harding, and I'm loving that book. So that is kind of my thing, right now. That is probably one of my favorites. And then, I read a lot of stuff by Jamie Lynn Hendricks, who's just got some great stuff. And I just got the new one from J.A. Jance. So I kind of got a mixture of stuff going on in my, on my bookshelf.
This is random. It just occurred to me.
Yeah.
But you do spend some time in Hawaii. Your husband is Hawaiian. Books set in Hawaii? Are any of your books set in Hawaii? I can't remember.
You know, it's funny, when I started writing and when I was 27, I actually wrote two novels, set in Hawaii, and they didn't go anywhere at the time. This is, like in 1990 something, long time ago. And I haven't revisited putting a series back there. And that's not to say I won't, but I haven't written anything recently, and I don't have any plans to. Pacific Northwest in particular just feels right for me because it's where I grew up ultimately, and I know so well. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. I mean, yeah, I never say never, but I've got so much in this area right now that I feel like this will keep me busy for a while.
Mm-hmm. Pacific Northwest is just so much more conducive in some ways to murder mysteries too, right? Crime fiction, because it can be gloomy.
It is. It has its
so bright and sunny.
It is. It's such a happy place.
Yeah. And I realize, people, there's still crime, but
yeah, but I always do a nod. I do a nod to Hawaii though. Like in my Pruitt series, I have Detective Cooney, and then of course Abby Keliikoa in this series. So I do a nod to the Hawaiian Islands, but I haven't, I may set one there eventually. We'll see.
I do like also in this one where Jax keeps, this is a minor point, but because there is the murder of a surf shop owner, and then we meet another surf shop owner, Jax keeps wondering, why are they in Oregon where it's cold and gloomy? Why are they somewhere sunny? So you do bring in little Easter eggs.
That is true. Yeah. And it's so funny because I go down to the Oregon coast quite often, and I do pass these surf shops, and I'm always like, man, people are crazy. And then when I go out to Indian Rock, which is down at Cannon Beach area, and people are out surfing, and I'm just like, these guys are nuts. But they do it. So
I agree. I think the same thing. Burr.
everything has to be warm for me, so yeah, I have a hard time.
This is unrelated, but it's related tangentially. It's very strange to live in Portugal, where the Atlantic Ocean is now on my west coast instead of my east coast, and it is very warm. Like it's not Hawaii warm, but I was in the water on New Year's Day, so it's very weird to be in the Atlantic Ocean in winter.
Yes, I would imagine that would be really weird. Although it is sort of like the Pacific, right? Because you go to Hawaii and it's warm, and you're in, December, January, you're in the water, but you come over to the Oregon coast, same Pacific Ocean, and
exactly.
You'd need a wetsuit and everything else.
Everything, yeah. Well, if you wouldn't mind sharing all of your social media internet details, website, any social media you're active on, so if people want to know more about you or the book, they can go find you.
Yeah. So the best place to find me really is at my website. If you go to marykeliikoa.com, MaryKeliikoa.com, and sign up for my newsletter. I do giveaways quite often. I, drop in about once a month and just talk about what's happening. It's always the first place to figure out, find out what's happening with me. All my social media channels are there as well, but I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, and BookBub. But I have not done the TikTok thing, so don't look for me there yet. But Facebook and Instagram, I'm there quite often. So yeah, come check it out. I'd love to have you on my newsletter. And
understandable about TikTok. It's a different animal.
It is.
And every time I talk to people who are on X, Twitter, nobody ever quite knows what to call it.
I know.
I'm probably just always going to call it Twitter.
Yes, probably. I know. It's just it's hard to move it on. It just is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So we have covered a few things during this time, but is there anything that we haven't talked about that you were hoping to highlight or bring up during our time together?
Gosh, no, I think we covered everything. I just, I hope you guys will check it out. It's been a fun book and series to write, and I hope you like Sheriff Jax Turner. If you do, leave a review if you end up reading it.
Absolutely. Reviews are so important.
They are. Absolutely.
Well, Mary, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about the Misty Pines series, especially Deadly Tides. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Sarah. Aloha.
Thank you once again to Mary for joining me on her third time on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy speaking to her whenever she is here. So thank you to Mary. If you are a fan of character-driven crime fiction, then you should definitely check out the Misty Pines series, as well as Mary's other series. That's the Kelly Pruitt series. That might be something that you are interested in, or if you have someone in your life who is a crime fiction mystery fan, especially of the character-driven variety, then this might be something that they would want to check out, these two series. And again, if you want to hear either of Mary's other episodes, those are episodes 319 and 380. You can listen to those as well. The first one we talk about one of the Kelly Pruitt books, and in the second one we talk about Hidden Pieces, the first in this Misty Pines mystery series. So thank you again to Mary. Thank you, as always, to you, my listeners. You know how much I appreciate you. There's a couple things that you can do if you would like to help the podcast get to more listeners, such as yourselves. The first is to like, subscribe, follow, whatever on the podcast platform, or the platform that you listen to this podcast on. That's very helpful. You can also leave a review. Doesn't have to be anything elaborate. Every review helps. Written, starred, one sentence. All reviews help get this podcast out to more listeners. And of course, you can follow the podcast on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I love hearing from you. It's Halloween. What have you been reading? Is it horror? Is it silly? Is it completely unrelated to Halloween? Thanksgiving is tomorrow. Goodness, November is tomorrow. What will you be reading in November? Come find the podcast and me on social media and let me know all that you've been reading. Let me know what you've read in terms of the authors that we've talked to, all of those things. Love hearing from you. Hope you're having a great week. I hope you're having a great Halloween. It's not too cold for you if you're going to go trick-or-treating. Be safe. Have fun. Get lots of candy. Eat that candy for me and don't transfer the calories to me. Have a great evening. Whatever you're doing for the rest of the week, of course, I hope that you find yourself with plenty of time to get yourself lost in a great book. Talk to you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.